right, guys, I am Kyle. I have been your host along with Miss Jen and so many other greats here from the comic book shopping experience this weekend. We're going to bring in another one right now. The six-shooter, the man, the myth, the legend, Jesse James. Jess, what's up, buddy?
Nothing. I am having a fantastic day. Just left 10 hours at a live auction, expecting to buy one box of things, but I end up buying 72 boxes of things. So I'm still trying to figure out how that worked, how we got into that flow. But you
Jesse's
get
the only
egged
person
on.
I know who'll be like, I went for one McRib and bought the whole McDonald's.
Yeah,
That's kind of how
exactly.
Jesse is.
Yeah, it's just one of those things, but it's cool to be in the comic book world today. I bought as a comic book collector versus being a comic book store owner, so it's an awesome way to collect comics. So,
Well, we are going to bring in someone I know you've known for years. He's one of my newest friends in the industry. Another great legend that we've had today, an amazing creator and writer, Raven. I love his name. Naked Under These Clothes, Gregory. Hey!
Hey, what's up, people?
I will let you guys have some fun.
all right, folks, what is going on? This is the comic book shopping experience. The experience expo going on. Of course, we're ending it with my good friend today. I've known Raven for 11 years. Very first guy ever to sign at my store. First guy to hang out and bring me actually all the cool people to my store. I could go down the list of people I would have never met without meeting Raven. He was a neighbor of mine for about 4 or 5 years as well. So great guy. Raven, what is going on?
Oh, nothing much, man. Just hanging out here, talking to you. I've missed you, good sir.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
looking fabulous. You looking better every time I see you. It's like you're aging in reverse and shit.
Yeah, exactly. It's from powerlifting all these long boxes that we get into the store, and you would think the youngins would go over and help me, but no, they let me do all that stuff. So plus that's work. We don't want them at work. So Raven, tell me how you got started in comic books, because I know you are a back issue guru. You love comics. How did you get started?
Well, what happened was, I'm not sure of the particulars, but my mom met my dad, and at some point in time, they had sex.
Right.
And then 9 months later, boom, I was born, and the comic book world rejoiced.
Do you remember?
There was
Do you remember watching?
And everything.
Oh, yeah.
It was like, oh, the Raven is born. Let us all rejoice. Now we boobs and butts on covers because that's what people like.
Now, but what was your first comic book store you started hanging out at?
Oh, see, and I promised everyone, Jesse, that this was going to be the most unconventional interview of all time.
There you go.
So I'm going to be going off on tangents for everything you've planned out. And my goal is to make you bust out laughing. That's when I'm with you, I don't have to have notes. Okay. I like this. The very first comic book store I ever hung out was I used to hang out at Hero Comics. I actually got my start working there. I used to go up on the roof at the tender age of 16, and the owner of Heroes Comics actually owned the plaza itself when it was at 35th and Thunderbird, and I used to tar the roof in order to be able to get my comics. So I would, during the summer, during the hottest part of the summer, I would lug these big, huge tarp rolls, and I'd get the tar, and I'd go up there and I'd tar the whole roof, and I'd re-roof the whole thing just so I could buy some comic books.
So you had to transcend. So were you on the roof tarring saying, man, if I just wrote this book, or was it, oh, I got those comic books and that's what started you down the road to become a writer? Or how did that actually work?
So the way I've always loved writing since I was very little. I actually have the first comic book I wrote when I was 4 years old somewhere. But I always loved storytelling. So what happened was many years later, this is after I had become a comic book collector. I loved Hulk growing up. When I was in 6th grade, my mother's boyfriend gave me a box of comics, just a big giant box of comics. And I believe there were a bunch of House of Mystery, some X-Men. X-Men 94 was in there.
Wow. Okay. Sure.
Wait, was it X-Men 94 or 96? Whatever's the first appearance of the whole team, that was 96. In there. Incredible Hulk 181. I had that.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So from there, I just never looked back. I was just always into comics. And then Age of Apocalypse happened. They said they were killing off all the X-Men. I just got hooked onto X-Men comics then. And I started going backwards, getting caught up. And then eventually I had this massive collection. And in 2000, it was either 1999 or 2000, a couple friends of mine and me were hanging out together. And we were, hanging out like young people do, partying, smoking weed, which is now going to be legal in Arizona. So we can talk about it.
Right. Sure.
And somebody was like, we should make a comic book. And I said, what kind? And they said, I don't know. And that was the night I went home and started writing The Gift.
Right. Yeah. And there's what's funny about The Gift and the notorious stories of you hanging out in Atomic Comics, and no matter what someone grabbed, you would run up and you say, you know what goes good with X-Men? You should try this gift. And hundreds of people have told me that they actually bought the gift from you, not even working in the comic book store, just hanging out and saying, oh my gosh, you gotta get this. How does it feel when you walk into a comic book store and you see The Gift #1 on there? How was that feeling? How did you feel?
Oh, it was by far the there's nothing like it. There's nothing. The comic book world is there's a lot of stress involved with it. There's a lot of I don't want to say politics, but there's a lot of shit that comes with being in the industry. But I will say this: the comic book industry, for me in particular, has been filled with so many firsts that I just can't put into words how amazing it is. Like, you remember the first time you went to San Diego Comic-Con.
Right.
And you walked into the hall. You walked into the hall and you saw the convention for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like, screen's freezing up. When you see your book on the shelf for the first time, it's one of those firsts. You put so much work and so much time and effort, and you dream about this thing becoming a reality, and you spend so much time with it, and then finally it's on the shelf, and you're like, wow, I did it. And then you have to do it again and again. Right. And then years later, I would spend, and this is not an exaggeration, I spent years chasing J. Scott Campbell to do a cover for me. And to finally get Campbell to do that Wonderland cover was like, never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that I would get to work with some of the greatest artists this industry has ever spit out, from David Finch to Campbell to Mike Deodato. All these people I grew up reading and loving and just enjoying their craft and watching them grow. Not to mention Ebass. I mean, he's one of my closest friends. It's just been a whole entire career of firsts, where every single time I don't think it can get any better, it gets better.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about this, the one note I have in my head is the opportunity your books have brought to cover artists who probably would never had the opportunity to start off with big books, mainstream books. Uh, uh, how were those pitches sometimes to Zenoscope where it was someone you personally knew who was on that crust? How did you actually do those pitching?
Well, I think the best example is Mike DeBalfo, a
Right.
good friend of mine. I found him on the wall at Atomic Comics. He had drawn a very Campbell-like pinup, and I found out who he was, and I got his information. And at first, in the very beginning, trying to get somebody on a cover at Zenoscope was a little difficult because we didn't have a lot of established names at the beginning, and they wanted to see that these people were capable of doing what they said they could do. So a lot of people, including Mike, had to do spec covers, which are basically, you know, you do an image and then you say, hey, if you guys like this, buy it off me. So Mike did that, and he went on to have it still has an illustrious career at Zenoscope, Aspen, Big Dog Inc. And I mean, every cover he does, I see him get better and better. Nei Rufino, also one of my closest friends in the world. She started out doing a spec image for colors on Return to Wonderland, and Wonderland just blew up, and to this day we are still working together. And again, you know, that's my buddy. There's nobody above her. Love her.
Sure. And what's crazy is, you know, I've done 309 exclusives, so one of the most biggest store exclusive makers out there. But our first cover was your book with Mike DeBalfo on the cover, and I remember having that party and you bringing out Ebass and Nei, and it's very hard when I try to explain to people the clique that we actually have grown into with our community, even though those people live afar. Is that natural to happen in the comic book industry, or do you think we're just that kind of that we all fit into that group?
It's strange because I remember years, like almost a decade ago, I had a conversation with Renee Geerlings, the vice president of publishing over at Top Cow, and she had told me about it's really funny how you may meet people in this industry and become friends with them, but the people that become your pack, your inner circle, they're the people that you come up with together. And I feel like, especially you, I mean, since day one, you pushed Zenoscope more than any other comic book store I've ever been to, and made it one of the #1 sellers at your store, whether it was the regular comics or the exclusives. And same with Ebass and Nei. We all came up together all around the same time. And I think part of that kinship that we all share is that, you know, we've all kind of gone through the ringer together, whether it's the good times or the bad times.
Right.
I'm still amazed to this day that one of the biggest events I've ever had in my career was at your store with like 2 days notice, and you were out of town, and you were just like, go for it.
Yeah.
And it was just packed. And it was just, I mean,
yeah, I actually, believe it or not, I was on a panel in Charlotte, and the Charlotte convention, and someone had come up to me just before my panel, and they said, so I don't get this. How are you doing a convention signing at your store with huge people at your store, yet you're in Charlotte? And I remember seeing the picture and my mom being in that picture, and I said, well, my mom's at the store, so my mom and Raven probably just put it together.
Yeah.
It's amazing when you look at the stuff that we have done, whether it be your 100th anniversary or your 100th issue, Ashcan private parties, and being able to do that with 40 artists and you not knowing jack about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I just think it's kind of cool. We've actually had this great growth in the industry, and kind of with not the top three, really not doing it with the top three, but actually bringing independence to the forefront and taking customers. And you know, these customers, they're rabid. They love your stuff. And as a writer, I think that's amazing that you have transcended to the customer base that follows you.
Yeah, man, it's really cool. I mean, Arizona shows a lot of love to comic book people. Speaking of which, I have a funny story to share with you.
Sure.
So I didn't know if you knew this, but okay, wait. Oh, just zoomed in. That's cool.
There you go.
I don't know why that happened. Now my face looks bigger. So somebody did this on purpose. So funny story to tell you. You are the only close friend I've ever had in my life that I've actually blocked on Facebook.
Yeah.
Now, here's the funny reason behind it. So I was, for some reason, you know how I always like your post on Facebook?
Yeah, sure.
For some reason, the algorithm made it so every single one of your posts popped up on my thread. And it wouldn't stop. And I unfollowed you. They still showed up. I unfriended you. They still showed up. So finally, I blocked you. They stopped. And I forgot to unblock you and add you back.
Right. Sure.
All this time. And I was like, when you wrote me, I was like, I hope you didn't think I was mad at you or anything.
Yeah. No, believe it or not, I, you know me, I'm very social, and, you know, I really rock it out when it comes to social networking. And I can't tell you, if I was to go to my computer and bring my laptop, how many people would say, are you and Raven not friends anymore? Because people connect us so much. Yeah. And I would just say, well, you know, Raven's off doing his crazy stuff and whatever, and we'll get this back together. But it is funny how you're only 5 minutes from my store, yet yeah. I think the cool thing that we learned very early, and this is the cool thing, we learned it very, very early, that Facebook was the place to hang out, keeping friends with your family, but your kinship with your fellow creators. How was it before that? Before you got on Facebook, was it a challenge to have any type of communication with anybody?
Well, I mean, we had MySpace, we had the Bendis board. There's a lot of heads out there that remember message boards back in the day.
Sure, sure.
But outside of that, there wasn't really a sense of community outside of Twitter, maybe. I mean, I would get emails from fans quite a bit, but nothing like being able to. I pride myself, and I don't want to sound egotistical in any way, but I pride myself on what you see is what you get with me. When I post on Facebook, I'll talk about my alcoholism. I'll talk about, hey, books are selling well. I'll talk about my kids. I talk about my life. I'm an actual person. I don't pretend to be anything I'm not, you know? And I feel that Facebook offers people a way of connecting where if they're being genuine, there's a real sense of community, just in the idea that there's all these things that we as individuals share that kind of isolate us from one another. And to know that there's people out there who are either having the same joys or going through the same difficulties or love this one particular thing or really is on the fence about the whole WandaVision, but is willing to give it a chance because Marvel never fucks up. Wait, am I allowed to curse on this?
Oh, there. Go ahead. You
Fuck.
are good to go. Yep.
Yeah.
We'll bleep
Okay.
it out if we have to. So you're good.
But yeah, I feel like that's the one true beautiful thing about social media is if it's not used inappropriately and obsessively, it becomes this thing that really connects individuals with one another.
Right, that's awesome. This is Comic Book Shopping Experience. We are on the Expo, or the Experience Expo right now with Raven Gregory, who's been doing this forever, pretty much. What is the, do you miss San Diego Con, or do you miss the after San Diego Con?
Oh, I don't miss it. I don't miss anything about that show at all. Wait, let me take that back.
I'm talking about the after parties, so, or
Okay.
the after get-togethers.
I miss. Well, oh gosh, how do I say this? San Diego Comic-Con has a lot of wonderful memories for me, both during, before, and after. And I love everything about San Diego Comic-Con in the confines of those memories. But given my current mental state, I can't stand San Diego Comic-Con because there's so many people. Last time I went, I was very claustrophobic.
Oh, wow. Okay, sure.
Yeah, because there's so many people there that I had to rush to the booth to get behind the booth because that's the only safe place because of how many people there are. It's like you're in a tuna can. It takes forever to get to where you're going. And then in the terms of the after parties, I'm an alcoholic, so you know.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
I've had some pretty wild rides at San Diego Comic-Con that I'm not looking to repeat, but there have been some wonderful memories that have come out of that show. From meeting RVD to oh my gosh, Wayne Brady.
Yeah.
I got geeked out. Shit. Man, there's just so much stuff that's happened.
Yeah, I tell everybody about, I think it was my second or third year, and there was like 18 of us crammed into one room, and Joe or Ralph came in or someone like that, and they couldn't believe how many people were just laying on the floor because you partied until they kicked you out, and then you just got up, and it's like, okay, let's go. You rock with the fans. It's an amazing thing. So is there one convention that you would want to go back to that kind of has a good feeling for you, or conventions are just out right now for you when they come back?
Yeah, conventions. I mean, I'm sure. I'm the older and older I get, the more there's a lot of anxiety. Like I remember being much younger, and I didn't feel anxiety about anything. And now it's like it's very easy for me to get anxious about particular things. And conventions for me, just the crowds, it's very stressful. But I do miss the fans. I do miss interacting with the fans. I've always loved hanging out with the fans, whether it's before the show, after the show. I miss panels so much just because there was that sense of being able to give back, especially during writer panels. When I first started doing comics back in 1999 or 2000, the very first show I ever went to was MegaCon in Florida.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
I remember doing conventions for a whole year, just going to panels and soaking up all the knowledge from all these writers and storytellers and talking to people in Artist Alley, talking to artists, talking to writers. And I think that as a creator, it's extremely important that you always be willing to give a little bit of your time back to where you came from. You know, one time we were not comic book writers or store owners. We were people who wanted to be comic book writers or store owners or artists or et cetera, et cetera. So that's one thing I really do miss. And also because I just have a blast on panels. They're the funnest thing for me because I never take myself too serious. And usually I'm with somebody who gets that concept and we get to put on a good show. But yeah, it's the older and older I get, just conventions seem to be a very stressful environment. In the sense that I don't like leaving my kids. I like spending time at home with them, and just the crowds, man. The crowds, it just wrecks me.
I think the funniest thing, and to this day, I think it's the funniest thing ever, is Raven was in Tucson, and he was just sitting at his counter, and I think we had Ebass distract you. And so Ebass is talking, you're turning around, and John Layman put all his books in front of your table. And I walked by and said, Raven, let me get you this picture of all your great books. And you did this greatest pose, so excited to show off your books, but they were all John Layman Marvel books. On the crap is he had like Bay City Jive on there and Sentinels.
There it is. That's the one. Because I mean, from this day, me and John have this. In case none of you have heard of John Layman, who wrote Chew, is now writing Chewed. What's the new one called?
CHU. Chew. It's just,
Chew with the daughter. The Time Crazy, the man who fucked up time, and countless of other books. We have this rivalry going over the years where I made fun of John one time for writing Sentinel, which you know, I don't even remember what the story is about, but it just, for whatever reason, it was an easy target, and I was like, I'm gonna fuck with him for the rest of his life about writing Sentinel. Not that the man didn't go on to write Detective Comics for DC,
right?
But Sentinel, I could fuck with him forever. I never got to Marvel, but I never wrote Sentinel. So he likes to play this joke on me where he'll slip that book on a table. I don't know where he has copies of this freaking book. It's like it's endless, but he'll always put it on the table.
It is you two are probably, you know, you try to figure out this industry, and it really comes down to the guys that find ways to have fun are the guys that are the most successful. It's just the funniest thing. I think people, when they walk up to your book, they're so excited to see you, they want to meet you. How do you get to the shy customer? Because I've been with a lot of customers that have been shy to come up to you at your counter, at your table at conventions. Do you have to kind of draw them in, or do you think it's a natural thing where eventually they'll come up and start talking with you, get some stuff signed and all that?
Well, I mean, I always try to be very personable. I mean, you've met me. I will literally see somebody with a Spider-Man comic book, and like you said, be like, hey, man, you like Spider-Man? You know what you'd really like if you like Spider-Man? Check out Wonderland.
Yeah.
You know, it could be like, hey, you like Johnny the Homicidal Maniac? Oh, my gosh, Wonderland's for you. Oh, shit. Do you like breathing? I like breathing, too. You know what's really cool for people that like breathing? Check out No Tomorrow, Irresistible, whatever. Like, I'm kind of I mean, and truth of the matter is, there was probably maybe like maybe 25% of the time, maybe 30-40%, I was probably a little tipsy. So I have no fear when it comes to talking to anybody randomly. And also, one thing I learned a very long time ago, and I'm pretty sure it was Ali Garza who taught this to me. we had did, I believe it was Fan Fest. I remember it was at the Cardinals Stadium. I don't know how many years ago, like 5-6 years ago. And I remember Ollie was sitting right next to me. And for whatever reason, one particular day, I wasn't upset, but I was bummed out that I'd set a goal to make money wise, and I didn't hit that goal. And I was talking to Ali about it. And for those of you who don't know Ali Garza, he's this exceptional artist. He's done tons of exclusives for me. He's worked for DC. He did Teen Titans or Robin or some shit over there. So yeah, I think it was Teen Titans. Ninja Boy, exceptional artist. But he sits there and he tells me, he's like, you know, when I come to conventions, I don't have a goal or a set amount of money I'm trying to make. I mean, I try to break even, but when I go to shows, I'm just going to have fun and meet the fans. And once I acquired that mindset of not caring, and it's very difficult to get there because, especially if you're traveling somewhere and you've paid for a plane ticket, or you had to pay for a booth or a table, or you have expenses, or you have bills back at home, it's a very difficult place to get to. But once I got to that place where I could go to shows and just have fun and interact with the fans and enjoy the fans and enjoy conversation with the fans, instead of one thing I absolutely hate, and I try not to do, is, have you ever been talking to somebody at a show or bought something and you get the sense that they're kind of like, okay, you bought something, it's time for you to go.
Right. Yep.
Because I have other customers to deal with. I mean, it's a business, true indeed, but I hate the sense of ever having to rush a conversation because I want to make money. You know, I feel like that does a disservice to the fans who actually support you and will carry you throughout your career. I'm very happy that there are so many fans that I still have from the gift, because if somebody comes up to me at a show, I can't remember how many times I've ever left my booth and been like, hey, you got to check this guy out because this guy has exceptional art, or you could learn something from this guy if you're a writer, or this is the book. Or even I remember one of my friends, Karita Ho, she showed up at a show in San Diego and had this beautiful tattoo of J. Scott Campbell's Wonderland on her side. And I took her over to meet J. Scott Campbell because I was so flattered that somebody would actually do something like that. I've always prided myself on being able to have that kind of relationship with the fans, even though sometimes I understand people get tired. And I mean, I've been tired at shows. I've been hungover at shows. And I mean, you've seen me at Tucson Comic-Con. Sometimes I have slept at shows.
Yes. Yeah. I think it was Emerald City where I had said, I was walking around like, where the hell is Raven? And someone pointed underneath the table and you were passed out under the table. I mean, you just got to do what you got to do at that moment. So to wrap back a little bit, because I got a couple of people that have texted me just a couple of seconds ago. How did you go from the gift to all of a sudden Wonderland, and how was that pitched to you, or did they pitch, or you pitched to them?
Well, the story of that is, so I was doing the convention circuit. I was doing about 20 shows a year with the gift.
Wow.
And along the course of that, I would run into the guys from Zenescope, and I love their book, Grim Fairy Tales, because it had a very Twilight Zone vibe to it, and I love Rod Serling growing up, Richard Matheson, all those guys. And we just were fans of each other's work. And one day on Newsarama, and for the kids out there, this is how weird the comic book industry is when it comes to breaking in. They were publishing Final Destination. And in the gift, in every issue, somebody dies a horrible and very unique death. So when I saw they were publishing Final Destination, I just wrote them and I said, hey, guys, I would love to write this series. I wrote the gift. Somebody dies in unique ways in every single issue. I was born to write Final Destination. So they wrote me back. Ralph Tedesco, the VP over at Zenescope, wrote me back. And he said, sorry, man, it's already written. But hey, we're getting ready to do the prequel to the movie 7. We got the rights from New Line. Would you be interested in that? And I was like, oh my gosh, I love the movie 7. I was born to write this.
Right, sure.
I'm like, I'm fat. I can write Gluttony and get it. So, and I'm not even joking. That's what I did. Right. And so I wrote that. And the artist on it was Tommy Costello. God rest his soul. He's no longer with us. But he did an exceptional job. And then from there, after that issue, I had known so many people on the circuit that I was able to introduce Zenescope to a lot of people and kind of help them grow. And through that process of helping them grow, along the way, I had pitched them the idea of a Wonderland story. And together we collaborated and created Return to Wonderland. And from there, they eventually brought me on as the executive editor at Zenescope. And we just did stories together for like 6-7 years.
So, you know, people, because everybody always says, oh, it's bad girl stuff, or it's pinup stuff, or it's strong women. Where do you kind of place the way that you look at it?
I'm really fucked up in the head, and everything I write is basically me on a therapy couch. Wonderland, the theme of Wonderland was a dysfunctional family struggling to stay together no matter what happens. Surrounded by a horror story about Wonderland, how horrific it would be if this place of madness was real. Irresistible, about a guy being heartbroken, going through divorce and trying to find his confidence and the consequences that come with it, the waking, the fear of losing your child, you know. No Tomorrow, a man dealing with death, you know, from, you know, when people lose people and whatnot.
So is it an expanded universe that you are creating yourself? Is that how you feel that you've created this universe around the way you think?
Yeah, in my head, it's all the same place. It's all somebody made the comment a while back. Somebody said something, I can't remember, but it made me realize I've just been writing the gift over and over. It's always regular people getting some kind of power or some kind of ability or dealing with some kind of otherworldly situation, but it's very grounded in who these characters are and the flawed, tragic thing that makes them relatable to the average reader.
How far are you out on projects right now, in your head and physically?
I'm not far ahead on anything, actually. I tend to currently work on deadline-oriented projects. I don't really have anything in the books outside of Widow's Web, which I'm going to finally finish this year. I just finished after 5 years, and here's the insanity of this. Me and Niai Rufino have been working on Crows, Secret Life of Crows, for over a decade. And the last issue we did, the final part of the trilogy, I wrote 5 years ago, I believe. And I have been working on the prequel to that for about 5 years. And I just now last week, or I think it was the week before, sat down and actually wrote it.
Wow.
The Crows is something very, very unique in the sense that during the last panel, somebody mentioned that when Stephen King wrote Cujo, that he had no recollection of having ever written it because he was so high and coked out and on beer and booze and everything that he doesn't even remember writing it. Crows was very similar in that it's very different than anything I've ever done before. In my eyes, for me, it's one of the most poetic and beautiful stories that I've ever had the honor of doing, just because, you know, if for no other reason, I got to do it with my best friend.
Right. Sure.
And she had this incredible concept that she let me bring to life. And writing that was probably the most difficult thing I've ever written, because whenever I read the original trilogy, I have no recollection of having written any of it. And it's so stylistically different than anything that I've written in my career that trying to emulate that, I spent 5 years psyching myself out. You know, like I was so afraid of fucking it up that I'd freeze up every time I sit down and write it. And I've gotten to the point in my career where, and I really hope anyone listening doesn't take offense to this, but it's true. If I'm given a book, I now at this point in my career can take a step back and say, I am not so personally invested in this story that I'm going to allow it to emotionally and mentally fuck with me. I can just write the story because I don't give a shit.
Right.
Like, I give a shit about telling the best story I can possibly tell, but I don't let it consume me like I used to with stories like Fly. Like Fly dealt with, you know, a group of kids who got a drug that gave them the ability to fly. And as they grow up, you see how their interactions and use of the drug fundamentally change their lives for good or for worse, which was a huge metaphor for when my wife and I were struggling with meth addiction. So stories like that, when you're so close to the source material, they're amazing stories. They come out so there's so many people that have come up to me when my wife passed away and told me that No Tomorrow really touched them. Fly really touched them because they know someone dealing with addiction. These very relatable stories are stories that I've lived. And there's this sense, almost this romanticized sense as a writer, creator, where it's like you're trying to make yourself look down the barrel of a gun so you can see the bullet perfectly because you want this story to be the essence of everything. And I find that writing from that particular point of view can be very dangerous for creators, whether they're artists or whether they're writers or whatever creative endeavor. When you let the muse so consume you, it's a beautiful craft and art form, but I don't believe the craft anymore is worth your life.
Sure.
You know, one time, a very long time ago, I wrote a story for a publisher, and I remember having a conversation with the editor, and this is before I was a full alcoholic, struggling with alcoholism. But I was trying to stop drinking, and I remember telling the editor that I was having problems doing the story because I wasn't drinking anymore. And usually when I'd write, I'd have like a small glass, I'd have a bottle of Jack next to me, and I'd I'd drink a couple glasses while I was writing. And I remember the editor said to me very nonchalantly, well, if you're having such problems writing it, being sober, why don't you drink? And it was that kind of thinking that made me realize that sometimes you can take art too far if you let it take over you. So I try very, very hard to keep a level of distance between me and the work now.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. You know, you have this long history, this long story that people know, and I think that's one of the great things about you. And you said it about social networking, that you don't hold back. You are you, and people know all your struggles and everything you've been through. And I think that's why a lot of people gravitate to you. And you know, I want to jump on something that you had talked about, the crows and Widow's Web. Does it hurt a writer and an artist when your product is selling out completely, so that the future generation can't even get it? Or is the goal to sell out and not worry about that?
It's a double-edged sword. I mean, really, we all, as a person working in the industry, your goal is to get your book into as many people's hands as possible. You want to expose as many people possible to your work, because I mean, why else are we doing this? I mean,